Hey guys, Sleepy Reader here, Damien. Continuing, I guess, part two of my read through of Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Victory. I feel bad crediting it to Grant Morrison, but that's what it said on the dust jacket, and he's the through line, right? There's so many different artists working with him. So, yeah, I don't like the general pattern of crediting only the writers, but this just seems overwhelmingly Grant Morrison's project, right? So I'm just gonna go with that and stop apologizing for calling it Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Victory. So basically, I wanted to talk about the next four issues that I read, which were basically issue 2 of Shining Knight, then issue 2 of the Manhattan Guardian, and then issue 2 of the Zatanna book, and issue 2 of the Clarion book. So those books, I guess, came out first, and then some of the other miniseries came out later. So again, as I've said in part 1, this version of the trade collects things in order of published rather than linking of stories, but I think it's actually a good way to read it because it reveals the linkages between the stories and unveils them in a nice, pleasing way where you see the connections, and we're definitely seeing that here with these 3 books. The Shining Knight story continues where we left off. He's in the police car. The Shining Knight, Justin, escapes the police car, wanders through kind of the, if we didn't have the other underworld of New York City in these other books, what you might call the bowels of the city, the kind of back alleys with alcoholics drifting about and such. And he's followed by this apparently invisible to everyone else glob of something that's trying to make him feel bad and kill himself about, how Shining Avalon or Shining Camelot was totally defeated and he should blame himself. And then the other thread we have is on the West Coast in California, some wealthy, unkillable mobster someone has brought him the flying horse. How the flying horse got from Manhattan all the way to him, and how come the flying horse is not dead. I guess we can accept it's a mythological creature, not easy to kill, but certainly looked dead before. And I found this the more intriguing half of the story here. I mean, it's probably page-wise only a third or a quarter of the story of this issue. But I was intrigued by this gangster. What does he call himself? Like the unkillable Godfather or something like that. He references a scar on his neck, but the artist never shows us that. I don't know if that's a flaw or on purpose. But he seems almost sympathetic, even though he tells us he's kind of a killer. And he's served by this guy, whoever it is, and this guy who's called Crazy Face. It doesn't all really make sense. I don't know if it refers back to stuff that one might know in DC lore, but I don't know any of this. And then while he's talking to the horse, an arrow shot through him, and the Sita are attacking. And it's interesting because he says venom tipped. That's new. So I wonder if he literally is unkillable. And he mentions the cauldron. Don't let him get the cauldron, Crazy Face. In this issue, I don't think it's revealed to us what that cauldron is. There's a really cool picture of the Sita attacking, but it's another one of these recurring things in this book where the attack itself, it's just not clear. Like suddenly, I guess there's lots of mobsters around. I didn't even know there were lots of mobsters around before this moment. I thought it was just these 2 henchmen with him. So that's... Even though I was enjoying that part of the story, there's that kind of feeling of sudden randomness. in kind of a satisfying, although it was a little bit dull while the creature was trying to make him feel bad, Sir Justin rises above it and says, not while one night of Camelot endures. And there's some talk somewhere in here about the Sheeta can't fully conquer Earth or humankind or whatever it is they're trying to conquer as long as there is some shard of Camelot left. And then there's a confusing conversation with someone who can understand his ancient Camelotish tongue. And someone saying, but you won't have to fight alone. So I guess is that going to lead us to more of the heroes of the 7 Soldiers of Victory, or is it going to lead him to fighting alongside this mobster that we saw? I don't know. That issue I enjoyed, but it wasn't great. And another thing is I thought it was quite bogged down color-wise, that the colors did not interact well with the storytelling and with the line art itself. But it turns out the colors on this issue are by generally considered, and I usually love his colors, generally considered the best colors in the business, Dave Stewart, particularly back in 2004. But the colors just work the least well for me in The Shining Knight. So I don't know if this is a misstep by David Stewart or just a problem in my tastes or just a problem in combining Dave Stewart with this particular artist or this particular story. Cameron Stewart's the artist as he was before on the next issue of The Guardian of Manhattan. And I just say that because we go from Stewart to Stewart. He has a different colorist, Moose Bauman, who's fine. I think the coloring is mostly pretty good here. It helps with the storytelling. It's pretty dark, but of course we're underground. I'm not wild about Cameron Stewart's artwork here. I've loved it in other places, but it's fine. It tells the story well. And what a cool story it is with the clash of the 2 underground pirates, No Beard and All Beard. There's No Beard, who has, you can see it there, he has 2 hooks for hands. He has no hands whatsoever. And he's chasing after Allbeard, who's chasing after some holy relic, some first stone of New York City or something like that. And the pirates' dialogues are all wonderful and crazy and zany. And the flipping of crazy, homeless, drugged out people living deep in the bowels of the subway system into, quixotic quests, pirates on a quest. It's just, I don't know, it was really appealing and fun. Although, as I said in the previous video, also crazy, silly. So, it's just kind of a fun action thriller pirate on trains kind of story that has a kind of ending. So it's kind of the end of the last issue of the Manhattan Knights, and then Manhattan Guardian, and then this one complete a story, including your sort of ironic horror ending with that's rings back to EC Comics, if not further. And then there's actually similarly the Zatanna story kind of is it's a thread that continues from the first Zatanna issue, but it's very much a complete story in itself and very satisfying. Zatanna and her new apprentice, whose name I've already forgotten. But the art and color is beautiful in here. Who did the color? Ryan Sook did the art. Nathan Eyring is the colorist. I think I noted him last time. I thought he did a really great job. So that the storytelling is enhanced by the color, and the color, creates the mood and everything like that. And the dialogue is amazing. They go visit Cassandra. I kept thinking maybe she's related to Madame Xanadu, but I don't think so. But doesn't Madame Xanadu run a magic shop? So they visit this woman, Cassandra, who's blind, like the Greek myth, I think, who runs one of those magic shops that appear in horror and fantasy stories so much. And there's just great dialogue between her and Zatanna, and all kinds of fun stuff about the magic shop and Zatanna without her powers, and just cool, so many cool touches with the magic cat and the apprentice who actually has the magic power. And in a sense, all three women work together and solve the problem by the end, which is trapping this demon that has been summoned by Zatanna's one mistaken spell, really the only spell she did as a real mistake, which was, in her backwards language, wishing for the perfect lover, who for her turns out to be this demon who's stalking her and going to bring about some kind of apocalypse and doom. So, just really fun, and we end on a note of them staring at this wardrobe that I forget who they say it is. They say early on who it is, but clearly it's going to play a role later on. It's like something they should not open that they want to open. Where is it that they say what it is? Because it's definitely going to be important later. The Cabinet of Ala Kazum. It's a roach motel for spirits. Oh my God, I thought they'd broken this down to firewood after what happened. There was some strange gang of hero kids from way back, is that right? This is the sort of thing you would know. So anyway, that idea of a gang of hero kids from way back, I think this is going to be connected to what we will see in the next issue of Clarion. Is that the next issue coming up? Oh, and the other great thing about, in the last panel, we get to see the Phantom Stranger coming in. I love the Phantom Stranger, or at least I think I love the Phantom Stranger. And here's the amazing cover to the second issue of Clarion, which also gives us very much a pretty full story. It did continue on from a cliffhanger of the last book where everything had been set up. There's this creature, the Horgol or something like that. Anyway, the Horgol or whatever, which I guess is something that's part of the rite of passage for the people down below where Clarion lives. But since Clarion has snuck into the room, he has no protection, and the Horgol's going to kill him. But through a sequence of events, partially his own cleverness, Clarion is escaping, gets far enough up where the Horgol gets hit by a train. So then we feel like, as we climb upwards from the subterranean world where Clarion is, we're now, I think, in the world where the lowest level of the subways, this magical pirate subway world. And we meet a group of lost kids who are Leviathan, the 1,000 kids who have one mind, or hundreds of kids that have one mind, who seem all scary and awful. And there's a great twist with the guy who's helping him out, and eventually they bring back... And by the way, the cat that I was worried was dead at the end of the other issue is not dead. I'm going to have to go back eventually and reread these some more, especially the Clarion issues. But again, this Clarion issue was my favorite of the four, which again is ironic because I remember reading this one too and not liking it back in 2004, 2005. But the cat plays an important role, and there's kind of a neat twist where Clarion's innocence is not so innocent, and he's not so easily fooled or not so easily pushed around. and he teams up with Leviathan, and I really liked that. And then he goes up to the higher levels of the subway and then out onto the street to what he has been taught all his life is something called blue rafters, which of course is the blue sky, which is very cool. And then this guy shows up at the end. Oh, another nice touch is that Clarion has this dice that he rolls, and he talks about, adventure Tickle, what can we do next? Which way do we go? He talks a couple times about chance, and there's also talk in here about a god that's escaping or disappeared. And then this guy says I should introduce myself. I'm Mr. Melmoth. And I feel like earlier in the series I've seen him. Where was he? Was he part of something in the Zero issue? Or where did I see him? I've got a thumb back. So now we see, because we've read them one after another rather than reading one miniseries at a time, we see Clarion connecting up to this world that the Manhattan Guardian encountered. And we also somewhere in here are told that somehow the people that Clarion comes from are related to the Shida. So that starts to connect the underworld that we saw with the Manhattan Guardian to Clarion's world, but also to this evil that the Shining Knight is fighting through time. And I think that this talk about kids and stuff like that may connect up to Leviathan in Zatanna. So we'll see about that. But so sort of another round of these issues was really enjoyable. And I think what I'll do is maybe read the next set and then do another video and hook up the two videos. Otherwise I'm going to be putting out so many videos in this series, which again is just for me. If no one else watches it, that's fine, because I'll want to rewatch these later. But for those of you who have read this or don't mind it being spoiled as I go on issue by issue, I'm certainly really glad to have you along for the ride. And I've really enjoyed all the comments I got on the first video I put up, so definitely comment away in any way that it makes you think about. People were talking about, in my comments, about Kirby influence on this and how he wanted to do it like the New Gods, which was kind of 4 books. What was that? Jimmy Olsen, The Forever People, New Gods, and Mr. Miracle. So yeah, it was 4 books that were kind of rotating and weave together, and you got different bits of information there. So I can definitely see that, although I still feel much more like I'm reading from out of the Alan Moore Bible. And plenty of the feeling of the ADD Grant Morrison in the wilder bits, especially like in that Shining Knight issue. The Clarion issue and the Zatanna now seemed more under control and more focused, and as did the Manhattan Guardian. But put it all together, and you still have a very ADD ride here, going with 4 different stories being juggled around, and still very loose in the ways they intersect and connect. But that looseness has a fun to it for me. I'm sort of at the moment feeling like, I don't know, I can't think of the perfect example, but like there might be 2 bands that have a similar vibe, but one is really tight and one is really loose and sloppy, and depending on your mood, you might enjoy the really tight band, and in another mood, you might enjoy the really sloppy band, like maybe going from the Talking Heads to Television, or the Rolling Stones to the Juju Hounds, or something like that. So Grant Morrison, compared to Alan Moore, still seems like the minor one, but when you're in the right mood, he's maybe more fun than, or maybe going from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, but that's not really where I want to go, because I want things that have the same style, but one is loose and one is tight, and one is loose and a little bit out of control and a little uglier and wilder. like going from Aerosmith to Guns N' Roses or something. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't quite found the right analogy. And maybe I'm too obsessed with connecting Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, but something in these books definitely triggered that. Because of and even some of the artists, like because you got J.H. Williams involved and such, it just feels in a lot of ways like this couldn't have happened without Alan Moore's America's Best Comics. I've got to feel that Grant Morrison had recently, when he started putting all this together, had recently read those Alan Moore comics. That could be totally wrong, but that's my feeling about it. Okay, see you in the next round.